and thank you all for coming early morning on the last day of the conference. It's, if your presentation is based in the last day, particularly in the morning, for instance, the ALA, you cannot, expect so many people to come to the session. So, before going to the conference, you're going to have to be reminded. But this time, great to see all of you. Thank you very much for coming. So, my talk today is comprised of four sections. Actually, the first, I will briefly talk about why ethnography is important in my research program. For instance, I'm a learning scientist, so I want to clarify how ethnography is used in the learning sciences studies. This is the first one. It's a big one. And then I will go to the next, why quantitative beyond qualitative. So many learning sciences researchers have used qualitative ethnography, but very seldom the quantitative one. So I believe that the shift from the qualitative toward quantitative is, to me, a very natural evolution of the methodology. So I will talk about my idea of the natural evolution of the methodology in connection with the design-based research, rather than learning sciences research. Then, so I'm going to talk about the main part, what I've done in collaboration with many excellent scholars. My academic career started as a PhD student, as Karina explained, Harvard and Maria at University of Toronto in the early 1990s. Then I have been tackling several concepts of the idea they developed, knowledge building. So I will briefly introduce the pedagogical approach to education and what challenges my teams have tackled for years in relation to the quantitative study. So why ethnography in the learning sciences? In the learning sciences, researchers are concerned with both improving learning practices in the context of and developing or elaborating theoretical basis by which they design the learning environments. So those two interrelated research purposes are marked as conjectures in this diagram. So learning science researchers start with high level of conjecture to consider their embodiments in the learning context. Then they implement the embodiments to facilitate their expected mediating processes in learning. The finally mediating processes are consequently considered to facilitate final learning outcomes. So these steps are conjecture mapping. The procedure of mapping design and theoretical conjectures is called design-based research, a methodology in learning sciences. So in the design conjecture, researchers are interested in how their design embodiments facilitate expected mediating processes, while they're also interested in how the mediating processes facilitate learning outcomes in a theoretical conjecture. So the design-based research is the iterative process of mapping those design and theoretical conjectures through multiple designing attempts. It takes several years to conclude design and learning environments such as embodiments for leading learners to higher learning outcomes. Then, in the design conjectures in particular, I think, researchers are concerned with whether the embodiments facilitate expected mediating processes, but also they are very much interested in the discovery of unknown processes they didn't expect. So, the design conjecture is a process combining testing hypotheses with exploration of new discoveries. That's why ethnography is the best methodological approach to conduct double standard procedure in mapping design conjectures. So that's my understanding. Then, why quantitative ethnography beyond qualitative? In the design-based research, we start with qualitative analysis, in-depth discourse analysis, for instance, to come up with our embodiments which we believe can work as we expect in the design conjectures. But through the iteration of the design-based design conjectures, we have to compare the current embodiments with our previous attempts by examining differences in mediative processes policies. And should we hopefully analyze the total sets of collected data to examine mediative processes. So for these reasons, it's a bit of a revolution to us of the methodological approach in the conventions to gear up toward quantitative ethnography. One of the methodological revolutionary attempts by learning sciences researchers the multiple clarity approach. So their works were published in a book in 2013. One of the cheers of the book is, this one. So through several workshops over years, multiple research teams analyzed same data sets of the social interaction and shared the voices and perspectives on the social interaction for discussing possible integration. So it was a great attempt, I joined. But learning sciences researchers are still on the way to think of meaningful integration of methodological perspectives, including qualitative and quantitative. Then a couple of years later, in 2017, the David published a book of the quantitative ethnography. We had a chance to discuss with him and Brandon. They were in Japan right after having the reading group meetings of his book. Then the book described how and why we take quantitative approach in ethnography as a digital age. Well, the wonderful punchline, maybe most readers agree that we have to deal with the big data at the digital age. But what I was most impressed by his argument in his book is that strong connection between qualitative and quantitative approaches in ethnography. So they are productively complementary, not exclusive, like the positivist paradigm and the constructivism paradigm. So briefly speaking, the book is about that. We can apply the quantitative approach in the constructivism paradigm. So in the early 2010s, our research team was in the phase of considering how to use the quantitative approach for complementing with our qualitative analysis of discourse in the knowledge-building research world. So his book and his brand visiting in Japan was just best timing. Just best timing.
I got lost in the botanical garden that's under construction. Honestly.
For us, for a team, to put our salt on the quantitative approach to ethnography of data sets. So in the next section, I will describe a very first study of the quantitative ethnography of knowledge-building practices and the most recent one by combining our approach with the listening network analysis. So this is the third part. Absolutely. Quantitative ethnography of knowledge-building practices. Okay, I'm going to slowly show us in this section, I talk about what a team conducted before and after making the quantitative ethnography and EMA as a tool. So in the first study, I will report interaction analysis by using the temporal network analysis of discourse with a developed tool called Knowledge-Building Discourse Explorer, Keynote. In the second study, I will report a double-layered network analysis by combining EMA and Keynote for more appropriately capturing knowledge-building discourse from the perspective of idea improvement as well as shared epistemic agency. So, knowledge-building, I'm going to explain about the pedagogical approach first. So, knowledge-building is an innovative pedagogical approach in the learning sciences, and it has been discussed in the world for more than 40 years in international community of researchers. And it has been a basis for all the new policies of OECD, for instance, and also other consortium investigation reform. So knowledge-building has the following unique features in the slide as a knowledge creation practice. First, learners engage in collective knowledge through ideal prompt to discuss their ideas. The second, it's not necessarily oriented at single correct answer, but the approach respects the progress toward new ideas, continuous progress toward new ideas. Then finally, each learner should contribute to the collective knowledge advancement in their own ways. So these three unique characteristics are kind of drove us to think about new evaluation technique. So this diagram maybe explains well about complexity of the idea improvement process. So Hong and Simon explain the idea improvement in the knowledge building practice by using this figure. Through collaborative discourse, learners are expected to engage in idea co-elaboration as well as idea diversification. So horizontal line is idea diversification vector. The vertical line shows you co-elaboration process. So through collaborative discourse, learners are expected to engage in idea co-elaboration as well as idea diversification in a good balance. But in reality, learners do not follow the most effective trajectory, but more divergent and dynamic process of the idea improvement. So we wondered how we could capture such a divergent and dynamic trajectories of idea improvement through collaborative discourse. And literature research that time, we came up with the work on collective intelligence. And the collective intelligence studies, researchers have used social network analysis of a variety of exchanges in social interaction by human beings. Although the analysis has revealed how complex collective intelligence is, but not focused on the temporal trajectory over time in a learning context where a small group of learners engage in their social interaction. Therefore, based on their work, we started to develop software application of temporal network analysis of discourse from knowledge building perspectives. Behind our development of temporal network analysis of discourse, we have two grounding assumptions. The one is idea in a discourse may be represented as clusters of words, the vocabulary used in the discourse, a set of words representing the ideas. Then, second, collective knowledge advancement is represented as temporal change of word clusters in the network. So, in the next couple of slides, I'll be going to explain the very simple, the basic algorithm of the temporal network analysis of discourse. So, if you have any transcript data, hopefully in the CSV or maybe the Excel format, the original dataset discourse is transformed into a multi-type graph of discourse exchanges such as conversation terms and vocabulary of set of words used for the analysis. So this is the multi-type graph. Then, based on the cohorts of the words within each discourse exchange, for instance, we can make a network of vocabulary of words on one side of projection. On the other side of the projection, we can also make a network of discourse exchanges, basically cohorts of words, same words, over different discourse exchanges. So this is a basic, a very simple algorithm of the network analysis. But we're using the data, vocabulary and discourse data, other than compared with just connection between people or maybe commenting on each other, etc., etc. So that's the big difference. So based on the basic algorithm, we developed application temporal network analysis. You see here of the discourse. The network analysis of the community is usually based on a social relationship between people working together. But it does not show anything about what ideas people are engaged in. So Knowledge-Building Discourse Explorer candidates here automatically create social and semantic networks based on discourse transcription. My collaborator Rizko and I created ground design and functionalities that discussed with great software engineer called Yoshiaki at the third author of the paper published in DLD. That Yoshiaki as a kind of super programmer, super coding to build fast prototype in just 1 weekend. Right, you thought that. So, and after doing how the prototype worked, okay, this is the thing we like to do. Then we decided to continue this endeavor as a research project. That deal maybe 12 or 13 years ago. Then KBDX provided us with 3 different temporal network visualization. For instance, right, that is the network of llamas. Bottom left is a network of exchanges, such as conversation paths. Finally, the bottom right is a vocabulary network on the basis of the list of words used as programs. So our first attempt to examine idea improvement by using KBDX was published in a chapter and multiple criteria. Spring CSC. So because it was a simple application of the temporal network analysis discourse to examine the differences and university students group problem solving. So I think it's a good example for us to see how KBDX works actually. Oh, sorry. Work provided kind of discourse data by 2 groups. Participants were freshmen at a university in the US, and they took a course in general chemistry. In each group, a mentor coordinated their discussion. The students in the group were further divided into 2 subgroups and tackled one group problems here in 1A and 1B. Then, after the problem solving, they got together again to discuss about what they could find as a trend. So, we provided discourse data by 2 subgroups, each of which came from the 2 different groups mentored by different peer leaders, Julian and Matt, Julian and Matt. So, in a multiple cooperative project, several teams share the same data. In this case, the discourse data about freshmen solving the chemistry problem. It's very complicated. It took me many days to understand what they were talking about. Finally, I did. Then examine the social interaction from the sociological perspective. In this discourse data, we have 3 teams, very in-depth discourse analysis by original provided the key studies and also temporal network analysis, that is the task, and also CMU teams, including Kelvin and Jose, do analysis of the social issue on the same discourse data. So this is an example of discourse by G and subgroup. For examining idea improvements required to discuss speech selective words, let and underline, as a vocabulary to represent the conceptual ideas in solving this very complicated chemistry problem. Basic chemistry, to me, it's sort of like a physics, but I don't know, actually. So based on the algorithm I explained before, the basic simple algorithm, we conducted temporal network analysis of problem discourses by G and subgroup and R groups. In the next 2 slides, I will show you the development of the networks of the discourse by using the Keynote group led by G and also Matt. The first slide is by G. As I said before, the right outside is the social network of students. The bottom left is a network of conversation tasks. The bottom right one is a network of conceptual vocabulary. So the KBDX shows you the visualization of these 3 temporal networks. Discourse exchange by exchange. So you see how those networks are going to Anyway, I'm going to. So change over time, this shows a change by exchange. You can hear me, right? Okay. All right, so this is Jillian's case. Then I'm going to show you the other subgroup that are engaged in exactly the same program within the exactly the same amount of time. Then please pay attention to bottom right vocabulary. Here's my class. So this is the final state of the discourse. So do you see the difference in the temporal change of the vocabulary network between Jun and the map group? The structure of the vocabulary network by Jun was more structured and dense compared with the map. Although they're just typing exactly the same problem within the same amount of time. So let's see the development of the vocabulary network by two groups more numerically. So take this over. So this slide shows you the temporal change of a network structure matrix, total variable standardized degree centrality. I don't have time to explain the measure in details, but please understand that the measure represents something like density and structure of the vocabulary. So even though both groups tackle, as I said, exactly the same question, the discourse is unfolded in different ways. One difference between the groups is the length of the conversation times in discourse. The number at the horizontal line here does not say how long it was actually, but the numbers of conversation times. So based on the fact that both groups engage in their program in the same amount of time, the difference suggests that Jun group was more frequently exchanging their ideas. So that's the one thing. The another difference is the height in the graph. The height of this graph represents how dense and structured the network, vocabulary network is. So difference suggests that Jun group was more engaged in their discourse to organize their conceptual understanding collaboratively compared to the map. So this is the group differences we found on the basis of the discourse data by using a KBX temporal network analysis of the discourse. Our analysis find a further interesting result. At least to me, it's very fascinating to me about the peer leaders intervention. We focus on the Jun group in this slide, but because they are conceptually engaged in the team line. After solving the fast calculation problems, students, two subgroups of students gathered again and as one group and had a discussion about the trend based on their answers to the problems. The graph in this slide shows temporal change of the total value of standardized degree centralities in the vocabulary network. Then during collaborative discourse about the student, Jun, a peer leader, jumped in students' discourse 5 times. What we found interesting is the half-force time. You can see maybe. Is there any remaining question? So, in the hostile intervention, Jun asked students, does that make sense to everybody? Then, after the third term, all the students nodded and all said yes, yeah, we got it. Then, even though Jun had that all agreed that they understood the trend, she again took her first time. Then students' collaborative discourse is activated by her intervention and engaged in improving their ideas further. So we saw this story about the teaching expertise of Jun as a mentor. All the mentors do not necessarily ask your further question after all students answered that they were okay. And compared to math, as another mentor, the Jun was more concerned with how her students attempt to construct their conceptual understanding and help them to engage in productive interaction around their ideas. So these are findings we found. And so our findings agree with another in-depth discourse analysis about the interpretation of group differences. For instance, more rather than engaging in productive idea improvement, higher conceptual understanding is required. And also the peer reader plays a very critical role to coordinate their product discourse. Timing and what they're going to say, how they're going to say. So these are really critical educational intervention. Then in the discussion we finally say like further analysis is needed for quantitative differences and epistemic contributions to the collective idea. So in the KBDEX, we can do something like see how students' idea improvement is going on. But it doesn't necessarily show you how students are actually operationalize the idea improvement process. So we're very interested in kind of epistemic engagements by that during their product discourse. So through our studies, including the one I just reported, we have been examining idea improvement processes across a variety of product-driven contexts while discussing analytics for the idea improvement. We made a new idea of the quantitative ethnography and EMA as a tool to examine students' epistemic frames of collaboration. So after a discussion with David and Brandon in 2017, I think the leading articles they produced, we finally found that ENA should be another analytics tool for us to examine the completely different data of the knowledge building practices based on discourse data. That is epistemic agency. So epistemic agency is rather than engagement in the epistemic actions to improve the ideas through collaboration. So during collaborative discourse, learners should monitor their progress toward new ideas and take some epistemic actions. So these two layers should be analyzed and integrated to appropriately capture learners' knowledge building practices. So we started to think of the double-layered network analysis of discourse and knowledge building analytics. For demonstrating the analytics, I talked about design-based research, biology at high school students. So in our design-based research study of high school biology, we designed a conjecture like constructive jigsaw instruction proposed by Naomi here for facilitating student conceptual understanding of the human immunity system. So we started with high-level conjectures such as like productive comprehension of explanation of multi-zonal proximal developments facilitates high conceptual understanding. So in the jigsaw interaction, based on the unbound explanations, because students have some expertise in a specific area of their study topics, if they're going to interact with each other in the jigsaw groups, all the interaction among the students are going to create the zonal proximal developments in the ideas. So that's a high-level conjecture we hold at that time. And in a design jigsaw interaction, we implemented two embodiments such as generative activity to construct explanations and the jigsaw activity as a participatory structure. So these two embodiments were expected to facilitate learners' engagement and improving their ideas and epistemic agency, leading learners to high conceptual understanding of biology topic, the human immunity system in this case. So 39 10th grade students participated in this study and a part of the regular curriculum, and 35 completed both pre and post tests. So they studied the human immunity system for 3+ hours, and they worked in the expert and jigsaw group activities for 1.5 hours each. We first started with asking students how they thought vaccination protects us from infection. At that time, we have any idea of the messenger RNA or something like that, but that's a quite basic mechanism. human community system. Then after they individually reported their initial thoughts in the pretest by creating writing and drawing, they worked in expert groups with one of the three materials: temporal immunity, the primary, secondary responses, and third-mediated immunity. Then they came back to the original disc group and discussed all the three pieces of knowledge to explain how vaccination protects us from infection. As I told, the initial individual reports were regarded as a pre-test. After the study, we asked again to explain their thoughts in the post-test, how vaccination protects us from infection. Then we also video recorded their discourse activities by using kind of 360 degrees the camera is placed on the center of their desks. Then all of their discourse were transcribed. So then for examining their learning, their conceptual understanding, we use the structured behavior function framework, describing evaluating student conceptual understanding to appear in pre and post test. So the framework is comprised of three different types of components: the structural elements of the complex system and the behavioral description of how the system structure achieves the purpose. Then the functions and purposes of the system elements in a field. So when I point this in an aquarium, filters and structure remove waste by trapping large particles. That's the behaviors for removing aquarium particles. So these are kind of structure, behavior, and function framework. Then this is a framework, the SBF framework, the human immunity system we developed in cooperation with the classroom teacher based on their textbook. These are structures and behaviors and functions. So these three components are interconnected to one another in this complex system. Then the three areas with dot lines here are subtopics they study in that expert. So once students study here, then discuss about their ideas of how vaccination protects us from infection, whereas two other students study in the other area. So that's the discussion. So two independent raters evaluated which components of the SBA framework were used in students' explanation of pre-test and post-test. So after the identification of the student SBF, structure, behavior, function, the explanations were categorized into, unfortunately, no understanding. Yeah, goes on. Then single piece of understanding, meaning maybe they just learn about their expert. And also integrated understanding, meaning that they acquire some integrated conceptual understanding among the different pieces of knowledge. Then in the pretest, obviously we did not find anyone who manifested conceptual understanding of human immunity system. So therefore we just focused on the post-test and the running outcome. Then student groups were then divided into high learning outcome groups and low learning outcome groups. In the high learning outcome groups, every student succeeded in acquiring integrated understanding. So the category of the learning outcomes were used high and low, used as a fuzzy independent variable in the point analysis. The mediating process is triggered by our embodiments or examined by double-layered network analysis. That is, see so far, the idea improvement in the problem of discourse was analyzed by KBTech, and one of the epistemic agency was analyzed by another tool, the epistemic network analysis. So, and also using the clearness category of the shared epistemic agency, the seven different actions and scopes. So let me try to explain about it. Sorry, as the transcript is totally in Japanese. Yeah, but some of them can understand it, but let me explain the double-layered network analysis with a concrete example of discourse data here. KBDX and ENA analyze exactly the same transcript data from a different perspective. First, we analyze how students engage in their idea improvement by using the KBDX. So selecting words and conducting the KBDX analysis to create the vocabulary network, temporal change of the vocabulary network by each group. And also detecting multiplicating, as I said. Then also, second, each conversation term was coded by 7 actions, epistemic actions categories. Then, and visualize the relation to the two-dimensional epistemic space by using an epistemic network analysis. We didn't do a kind of sophisticated procedure of epistemic network analysis, but it's a very basic application of the epistemic network analysis of transcript data here. So from the next slide, I report differences in the mediating process between high and low learning outcome groups. So we found critical differences in idea improvement in discourse between high and low learning outcome groups. High learning outcome groups are engaged in their collective knowledge and content more quickly and intensely. So you see the kind of steep lines here compared with low learning outcome groups. So, how these students in engagement, engage the epistemic agency for the improvement in the discourse. So we conducted epistemic network analysis for examining how different high and low learning outcome groups in terms of their epistemic engagements. So we divided the total transcript of each group discourse into 3 phases: first phase, second phase, and final phase. Then conducting DNAs. So maybe these 3 are conversations, so we can see the difference in temporal difference. So conducting DNAs to see temporal change in the epistemic frames during collaborative learning. And now in the slide, we are seeing how the epistemic frames were changed over time. The squares show the means and centroids in the phase 1, the red one is the low learning outcome groups, and blue one is the high learning outcome groups. So triangles show the phase 2, the circles show the phase 3. So you're going to see the trajectory from the square, triangle, and center over the 3 phases from their product. So as we learn progress, focus of their epistemic engagement moves from the awareness of the lack of knowledge through constructing shared understanding, then generating product functions and activities. The trajectory of moving the epistemic focus was clear, and high learning outcome groups compared with the low learning outcome groups. And this is the first finding for us. Then next, we also have found critical differences in the moving of the centroids from phase 2 and phase 3 category, while high learning outcome groups were engaged in generative product activities in the third phase. The low learning outcome groups stayed at constant. So that's the difference we found. So results revealed that student conceptual understanding can be prompted when they engage in idea improvement in the problem of discourse. But unfortunately, in Japanese high school biology, it does not happen naturally. Even if we encourage students by designing the generative task structures and participatory structures like jigsaw structures. So a design conjecture suggests that we should further consider refinements and development of the embodiments to support low learning outcome groups, in particular through epistemic engagement and the recognition of the knowledge gap and the problem construction of shared understanding as preparation for their further generative problem. So this is the main of the second study. So I think it's the takeaway, it's the subsection of my talk is knowledge-building practice is extended by analyzing problems of discourse from 2 different perspectives. Collective idea improvement by KBDX and epistemic agency to deal with ideas by ENA. And the quantitative ethnography of knowledge-building practices, we have to deal with multiple units for analysis, and also were very much sensitive to temporality. And but most interestingly and importantly, coherency among three different theoretical perspectives are organized. The knowledge-building shared existing agency and also epistemic practice. So that is sometimes very difficult for us, but in this study, we can just settle down a very nice coherence among three different perspectives. So that's the end of my section of my talk. Then over time, I still have minutes there. All right. Okay. All right. So this is the final section of my talk. In the final section, I have a kind of showcase of the ongoing research projects of knowledge-building analytics by our team as well as others. The first one is algorithm development of KVDAX. The second one is instructional design. And finally, multimodal analytics. So these three I'm going to talk about. So I'd like to talk about three streams of the algorithm development and the KVDAX, idea improvement on a real-time scale, detection of spectra, and identification of discourse terms. So, recent studies of the network of analysis of discourse propose several perspectives of temporality. One is the sliding standard window method used in the internet. The standard window is a central unit for researchers to analyze discourse as dialogue. So each single conversation term should be connected to its previous and the following conversation term as the unit of analysis, then sliding the window to make a adjacent table of cohorts of all reports. So the method is an attempt to capture the dialogical nature of this, so that should be important. The another perspective is the lifetime of the link between the nodes in the network. The original algorithm of KVDAX did not assume that lifetime of the connections between nodes, so that the network structure increases its density as new conversation time is coming in. But if we add a lifetime of the link on the network analysis of discourse, we can see more dynamic change of the network structures. If the matrix is going up and down. So total value of degree of centrality, I think, is moving up and down. So this is quite kind of parts of your art. So finally, we are also concerned about the horizontal lines of the graph. And in previous studies, x-axis showed just the order of conversation tasks, but each of them was not traced on the real-time scale. So one of our recent algorithm study of KVDAX discussed all the three perspectives of temporality, figure, and describe here, for instance. So one of the upside of the graph here, at the bottom one, visualization using the same discourse data, but the top one using the sliding standard window method and lifetime of the link, but the horizontal line is just the order of the conversation. Then, when we add another perspective of the real-time scale on the horizontal axis, you see the more real dynamic and environment idea improvement in the discourse. So these two graphs show you exactly the same results, but the dimensions are different, particularly the horizontal. Okay. So the next one, in another study discussing temporality, we attempted to automatically identify standards and discourse by using the temporal network analysis distance with lifetime of the link. This slide shows you the results in our study collaborating with Amanda and Mike at ICQE 2021. So in this study, we applied a very simple but powerful algorithm of the lifetime of the link. Links are made if we found cohorts of walls within a unit of the analysis, but they will be cut off if the same pattern of the cohorts of the wall is not seen in the next unit of analysis. So briefly speaking, we assume the total value of the degree centrality radically goes down when speakers attempt to end one topic and go to the next topic. So we operationally identified the pattern points of the time when the values was decreased repeatedly, meaning twice. Then here's one standard, here's another one. So for examining the appropriateness of the automatic detection of standards, we compare the result by 3 different approaches: interpretive and incremental and automatic. So the interpretive is the procedure to identify the standards by users. The incremental approach uses a fixed number of times as standard. 10 lines in this case. So then the right hand of this slide shows how the 3 approaches grow total discourse data and trajectory of the units of analysis and centrals to be found. Those incremental and automatic approaches do not depend positive standards that humans did. Then interestingly, the trajectories by all the 3 approaches are very much similar patterns other than that. And we did not attempt to conclude anything based on such a attempting study with small size of data, but we believe the automatic detection would become promising approach to iterative refinement and algorithm development. Then final example of the algorithm development is the identification of the discourse topics. In the ordinary cases, we usually select vocabulary depending on our research choice. Because we're interested in idea improvement in discourse, we select vocabulary representing various ideas and see temporal change in those words. But students engage in a variety of discourse topics during their collaboration, including off-task talk. So we're interested in how those ideas are, so for those ideas are related discourse topics are unfolding and during idea improvement in the period course for first-year university students. Our study at ISRS 2021 demonstrated the algorithm to detect discourse topics based on the temporal change in the degree of centrality of all noun words in the discourse. The exploratory clustering analysis has several interesting findings. First one of the result is high performance groups were found to engage in multiple ideas discourse topics at different points of time, whereas the low performance groups did not. So we discussed the constellation of multiple ideas is quickly for students to come up with better ideas by comparison between these two ideas. So ethno-methodologically informative approach like this, not just focus on idea improvement, just try to figure out what's going on here. Is important for us to more productively conduct the contextual tasks, as well as theoretical conditions. Then there's also studies of feedback with students based on the knowledge-building analytics. Gigi Fan, she is currently a postdoc in University of Mainland China. Presented their instructional design studies at ISRS 2021 to provide students using CSCR knowledge folder for their study topics in science with feedback information about problem discourse in knowledge folder. So they are going to use the KVX visualization as kind of idea framework so that students monitor what they're talking about and what others talking about. So after doing the map, after looking at the map, they are trying to iterate everything. So that's the slide. Then this is the final one. So multimodal knowledge-building analytics in the face-to-face interaction. I'm very interested in the face-to-face interaction like this. This online communication is popular sometimes, that face-to-face interaction is the most beacon technology for us to be engaged in social interaction. So in cooperation with the sensor technology engineering team at Osaka University, the Shunpei as a member of the team, we are conducting the development of the sensor badge. It's used for detecting nonverbal behavior of environments during the discourse and the knowledge-building practices. The badge works with battery and have 3 different sensors synchronized, completely synchronized to the service station. So based on the sensoring data, we now started to create social graph, chat face-to-face situations on the real-time scale, and also conversation turn-taking sequence. So we just started the development of the sensor badge and are now in the phase of consideration of the integration between verbal and non-verbal results. In the face-to-face context of collaboration in particular, non-verbal interaction must be a key to more concise understanding of knowledge-building practices. So in the remaining part of my pattern career as a year, I think. So I'd like to devote more time to the multimodal learning analytics of the knowledge-building practices. So that's my end of talk. Thank you very much.
There was no intention to rush you at the end. We can still return to your slides if you wish to help more. But thank you especially for showing such amazing and insightful illustrations of empirical work. Illustration of how methodology that many of us work with here can be applied in empirical context and in work with empirical data, and also very contextualized research problems. This was very insightful. We have time for questions and discussions, so let's kick it off. Who has the first question? Amanda and then David. Go ahead.
So I found a lot of utility in using the Knowledge-Building Discourse Explorer, and I love that this talk showcased that it can be used when thinking about how to structure or systematize your data if you're going to adopt a quantitative ethnographic approach. And also you can use it in tandem with other approaches to look at something from a different perspective and understand something in a different way. And so I'm curious for anyone else who might be looking to use an approach like this in their work. How would they go about that? What would you suggest if someone's looking to use KBDEX?
Well, yeah, the KBDEX was developed in very early 2010s, so it's based on the kind of Eclipse environment. So it's totally based on Java, so it's old kind of environment. Now the Yoshiaki is creating a web application like Web ENA. So if it's out, you can just upload your transcript data and see anything you like to see. So that's the one way. And also that, but one of the advantages of the KBDEX is, my team is more interested in very, relatively short period of time on the social interaction and face-to-face, for instance, 45 minutes and 50 minutes or so. So you can just play with it. Play with the KBDEX, see how your students' discourse going on in the context of the collaboration. Then you can just choose different tree, or you can just differently select the ideas, words, or any other words, or you can code it before conducting the KBDEX. So if you code, for instance, using the screener's 7 epistemic actions, you can see in the KBDEX quite dynamic temporal change of your course networks. But unfortunately, these two-dimensional space doesn't show you anything about the matrix space. It's just a topological relationship between columns. So it doesn't make difference.
Yeah, Glenn, this is great. I actually hadn't seen some of this KBDEX work, so it was good to see. But I'm glad we gave you time to share. And I sincerely want to apologize for walking away. I literally, the botanical garden is under construction.
No, it's just
yeah. But the thing I want to ask you about is have you thought about the process of what I like about this is kind of taking the results from one of analytic method using it to inform the next. You're kind of creating a pipeline, as it were, of analytical tools. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about either how difficult that is, or what we could do to, what the community might do to make it easier to integrate. We're starting to get more and more tools, and it feels like everybody has to do all this lifting to make them talk to one another. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are.
As I told in my talk, the most important part is not just integration of the tools, but think about the coherency of the different theoretical orientation. So the KBDEX is developed on the basis of the knowledge-building theory, and epistemic network analysis is developed on the basis of the epistemic practice. Fortunately, these two theories are quite good connection. Actually, usually the Carl and Marine talk about how knowledge-building practice is going on, and they always lay down concrete example of the discourse of like kids, but they don't talk about any kind of a little bit more abstract framework of the discourse. So then now, once we have the framework of like this on the basis of shared listening agency framework, we can see a whole bunch of different type of the context of discourse from the same perspective of lens, kind of epistemic lens, and also we can analyze knowledge-building practice. So the most difficult thing to me is to set up the coherency between theories. But because the KBDEX and the ENA, although they have a completely different, sometimes similar, but completely different argument, we have to be very careful about integration of these two tools. But also kind of network analysis. So if you're interested in kind of nodes and connections, and if you have basic understanding of the network sciences, that'll be the best. Maybe one of the best approaches we have to take.
First of all, thanks very much, Jun, for an interesting talk. I enjoyed it very much. I also have a question about sort of integration, but from a different perspective or angle. Inevitably, the data that you're taking here is data that's written on the knowledge forum, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's all written data, but there's a very rich life that's happening between the face-to-face communications that the students are engaged in. And I'm wondering if you have any thought about how to collect data, or how to, on one hand, take what's happening in the face-to-face world and inform what's happening online, and vice versa, of course, what you see happening in the online, and how that can help inform or enrich the descriptions of what's happening face-to-face.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And actually, that's the question and the knowledge-building team have been discussing, was thinking about for modern meta study. So
30?
Yeah. So usually they talk about any kind of knowledge-building practices for analyzing the discourse. The basic data is written discourse on the knowledge. So it's not actually the knowledge-building discourse; it's the knowledge forum discourse. So, but most of the people in the community are so interested in how the kids' written discourse are created on the basis of their oral discourse in front of the computers, and also how the written discourse is going to be a kind of object for them to reflect upon their idea improvement processes and take further actions in the oral discourse. So it's a kind of oral and the written discourse, so both should be collected, then analyzed temporarily. So that's the best way. Then, but now we're being more focused on written discourse points and knowledge-building communities. But even so, that layer is quite informative for us to think about the next step for designing an instructional design. But hopefully, in the future, based on the more fancy technologies, we can automatically transcribe face-to-face communication. Then we see how the oral discourse is connected to the witness. So that'll be maybe the next step. It could be possible.
Thanks for a really fantastic talk. I loved hearing about all the pathways you've explored on the analytics side. I want to ask you about some of the multimodal analytics work that you're starting to do. What led you to choose the sensor types and as far as inputs for future modeling work relative to others? Because one strand of work I've done is with biometric, and I'm kind of curious why you had opted for these and how would that align with what you are hoping to find?
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. As you think, a whole bunch of different multimodal sensoring technologies are out there right now. Then the reason why we started with these three sensing information is that would be a kind of information people might miss during their collaboration, but they could get if they carefully see their own collaboration. You know what I mean? Just for instance, the face-to-face interaction and the movement of the others, and also sound pressure, for instance. Sometimes we are, observing the students' group work and the PBR post that's happening right now in Japan. And even if we focus on one specific group of 3 or 4 undergrads kids or working on something, we cannot detect all the information. It's out there, but it's we can just fail to detect the information. So the sensoring technologies just support us to realize that. So that's why our team is not really involved in yet now in kind of physiological data. So it's just trying to figure out.
I think the one thing I'm wondering, and I don't know if Sana
Victor, could I ask you to speak up a little?
The one thing I'm wondering now, and I don't know if Sana is still here, but
Sana is just
synchrony, sort of how synchrony with respect to some of these intersubjectivities represented by individual data, and if that's something that you're thinking about, or if that's something that could be represented here, because that goes even more individual, but I'm trying to see how those coordinate.
Yeah, it depends on what are these extents you're interested in. For instance, from a psychological perspective, and kind of physiological data, it must be very interesting for them to see because it's happening within. But synchronization is very interesting for me because maybe we can find out some critical points of time before they're engaged in productive discourse in Barbary. So, or maybe some infrastructures should be there for them to be engaged in more productive interaction based on the discourse. So we love to see such a non-Barbary infrastructure.
I'll sign off with a question and a comment. Also in reference to your multiple lines of analysis that you presented, and also in reference to the talk by Karen, the first keynote, about slow research. So my initial question was how you establish the unit of analysis when you have multiple layers of complex discourse. But then I'll reformulate my questions in the context to refer to your discussion now. To decide what type of data we collect, what type of multimodal data, and how you analyze, and which methods, and which technology we use, or software we use. Don't we have to go back to what we want to know? So it's the unit of analysis important, what we want to analyze, observe and analyze. But that's also the result of our research question. So in the end, related to your question, Victor, I just want to pose a challenge. How do we decide, how did you decide in your work, what data to collect, which analysis to apply in relation to the research problem, the research question?
So it's to me, it's kind of moderate calibration of different methodologies, and also I think maybe in the first phase of our research project is going to see different model data, different data forms. But on exactly the same time scale. Then, because I'm interested in the student's conceptual understanding, the final benchmark is a discourse, or how they talk about their ideas. But before and after, following that discourse, or maybe before the engagement discourse, we have, on the real-time scale, we see some specific sequence of nonverbal action or something, or maybe sometimes students rotate the readership of the discourse over the whole time of the preparation. But sometimes they didn't. So some nonverbal actions could be useful for them to engage in for getting some conversation time in the form of discourse phase. So this kind of approach is see first the discourse data, then go down to the nonverbal data, then come back to the discourse data. So different layers in a real-time scale. This is the one way we like to do first. So that'll be a kind of total integration of the multi-modal data, yeah. But that's the kind of just using the different modified lens from verbal and non-verbal. Sometimes Roger just talks. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So when you're thinking about knowledge building, it seems like oftentimes it's centered around identifying important terms in a discourse and connecting those, and that's part of the process of understanding what's going on. Could you talk a little bit about if there are different ways that you identify what those important words and terms are when you're creating those visualizations?
One of the paradoxes of the discourse analysis by using evidence is if you're dealing with or interested in the emergence of ideas, you cannot determine what words are going to be included in the list because it depends on the learners.
Right.
It depends on your interaction. So one way is to just trace back the discourse or reverse engineering type of analysis. So that'll be kind of we usually do. But some NLP approach, natural language processing approach, is very useful for us to detect a different set of the words in a different time. So then the issue is going to be a granularity of the process. So first 10 minutes and next 10 minutes and such, or maybe there's last standard by each. So it depends. But if you're more interested in emergence of ideas, well, maybe NLP is a one way to do. That's TF-IDF. It's a very simple one, but one to back and dot to back. This kind of real.
Is there any kind of interpretive part of that? Like if you have words that show up in there and you feel like it doesn't make sense?
Well, we still have kind of very deep chasm between and the learning scientists and, for instance, NLP researchers. They do not have specific intentions about identification of the words and kind of thing in the context of the learning. So they're more like, okay, so let's say 100-dimensional space creates and calculate vectors of the dogs and also words and such, and try to figure out constructive words. But in the interaction of the human beings, the word's meaning is just constructed through the interaction. Then it may have a different meaning actually in different points of time. So it depends on the business. So, but still we have a very deep cosmic picture. even though we want to use the NLP approach, we should be very careful.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'd like to ask one. I'd like to invite you to perhaps raise the bow a little. There's so many important questions to ask about temporal analysis and modality and multivariate analysis. But perhaps the final question could be, you're working with curriculum development, conducting research on this. How could the work you're doing, both analytical and in terms of technological development and empirical, be applicable, or how could it be applied, in which context, in order to contribute to the development of learning designs and support for teaching practices and also for learning?
Well, if we're going to feed any information back to the teachers and students, most of the time we see is sort of like recent mutation of the findings. So it's kind of, they don't have, unfortunately now they don't have any kind of sense of interpreting the meta structures. So this is just analysis for the researchers now, but we have to think about more kind of simple enough and strong enough measures, or maybe kind of comments, any kind of information could be useful for the fractions. So, but now it's the network structure itself. It's just a network structure. So that if you need appropriate interpretation of the results. So that's why I'm doing this kind of research in the field of light teaching. So I'm doing action research rather than design-based research. I'm a teacher. I'm a professor in university. I really love to improve my kids, and so that's the motivation for me to do this kind of research. But how can I do to extend and generalize our findings to a wider range of the context? But we always welcome everybody to come to see, or maybe ask me about the evidence or any other tools which you might be interested in, and try to figure out how to integrate that. So that's it.
I have proposed, we had a wonderful paper session yesterday on engaging participants in research. YJ and her colleagues, Hazel and I don't recall, I think it was, a Japanese study, actually one of my colleagues, described ways of having participants actually both contributing to the research design, but also interpreting data and working with the data and then developing coding schemes and reflecting using those as prompts for reflection. Could it be a possibility in your
it could be a possibility for, the next step. Then, the final thought I have right now is how to sustain a community like this, or maybe continuously improve the quality and also increase the size of the community like this. Now we have very exciting ideas and lots of great scholars here. But I didn't think before, the scientific community is just there. All you can do is just go to the conference and make presentation and such, but management of the society is so difficult. And keeping the quality and keeping the stance and keeping the passion of the society is very hard. But if we can do that, idea is just continuously improved, then sometimes we'll see what we have to see. So that's what I'm thinking. So I'm kind of very interested in complex-based systems. So I don't try to hit someone kind of strongly, but just tough. So that we make a big influence on the systems. So that's one.
If there are no other questions, let those be the final words. Thank you so much.